Welcome to Type C Tech Reviews. Today we're going to be doing a review of the Dell G2724D. If at any point during the video you want to check out this exact same monitor, there's Dell.com links below, as that's the only place you can currently buy this monitor. But with that, let's jump into the review. All right, starting off, this is a 27-inch monitor with a 2560 by 1440p resolution. This brings the PPI, or pixels per inch, essentially how crisp and clear the image is actually going to appear to your eye. This brings it to about 109. Now, this is a good PPI, a very good middle ground for ability to hit those higher frame rates, but also having a nice crispy, clear display. As for the panel type, this is an IPS panel. Now, before we jump into the ports, let's talk about the finish of this panel. This does have a matte finish like basically all gaming monitors do have, but here the matte finish is significantly thinner. If you're unaware, matte finishes make the image quality more fuzzy. They decrease brightness, saturation, and overall clarity. And this depends on the thickness of them. This panel still uses the matte finish like I said, but has a very, very subtly thinner one. Throughout the video, I also will be comparing this monitor to the Gigabyte M27Q. They're both 1440p, 27 inches, and in this $300 price point. So they're direct competitors, and the Gigabyte has been my most recommended 1440p, 27 inch, 165, 170 hertz monitor. So there is going to be a direct comparison throughout this video. Now let's jump into the ports. Firstly, this has one HDMI 2.1. That's awesome. So this does have HDMI 2.1. If you're going to be using this for console gaming, this works great. With the HDMI, this goes up to 144 hertz. Whereas with the two DisplayPort 1.4s, this goes up to the full 165 hertz. So if you are using a PS5, Xbox Series S or X, then this is gonna work great for that to get high refresh rate gaming. But as for the rest of the ports, well, there are none. There's no audio output, there's no USB Type-C, it's just two display ports and one HDMI. All right, moving on to the refresh rate, like I said, this hits 165 hertz with a display port, 144 with the HDMI, and it has FreeSync Premium that works pretty much flawlessly with G-Sync. There's not really too much to be said here, because it just works well. All right, now moving on to an interesting part is brightness here. This is actually really, really good. This is rated for 400 nits, but after testing, this reached 475 nits, and that is in SDR without any weird stuff like boosting, contrast, anything like that. This is just standard picture quality, not really tuning the picture overall. So 475 nits is very good. This is also one step ahead of the Gigabyte M27Q, which reached about 430 nits of brightness. Both are very good, and for the price point, they're fantastic monitors and really good brightness, but the Dell has higher brightness mixed with that matte finish. I just like it a little bit more in terms of brightness, that is. Now, in HDR, this bumps it up to around 500 nits of brightness, but well, let's talk about the colors next because that kind of ties in. The color gamut here is where Dell lags behind the Gigabyte M27Q. This only covers 99% of the sRGB color space, so while you really get full color coverage when you're just doing SDR, this doesn't have a wider color gamut to make those vibrant colors in HDR. This means even with the slight increase in brightness for HDR, this is not a monitor that you're probably going to want to use HDR in because it's just not that great of an experience. The Gigabyte, on the other hand, covers 92% of the DCI-P3 color space, which does give you coverage of a wider color gamut, so using HDR makes sense for the Gigabyte. But again, you don't have as high of a brightness as the Dell, and overall, the HDR experience on either of these is not amazing, but it is going to be better on the Gigabyte. Now, the color gamut here is really the biggest difference why you would want to get the Gigabyte over the Dell. If you want to game on this, but maybe you also want to do some Photoshop or Premiere or stuff like that, some editing, then maybe the Gigabyte is the better option here. But for daily tasks and usage, I'm kind of leaning more towards the Dell because of that matte finish. Out of the box, it's great, plus a higher brightness. I know contrast ratio is exactly what you'd expect from an IPS panel. Both of these hit 1,000 to 1. Pretty just average contrast for an IPS panel. Now, as far as quality control issues with backlight bleed, the Dell had zero backlight bleed. It was very, very good, so no real problems there. And I would assume from their track record, probably not going to have any problems with backlight bleed. All right, but let's get into the gaming performance, response time, and ghosting. Firstly, this hits a claimed 1 millisecond gray to gray response time, which we all know is not true, but how does that translate into ghosting? And well, it's fantastic. Of the 3 response time settings, none have overshoot, and the fastest is the best setting, which is extreme. Even with much faster whips, this is a very, very little ghosting for this panel. It's honestly quite good. We do expect that with these IPS panels at this point in time. They're just really, really good. So even if you are doing fast-paced FPS games without having a 240 or 360 hertz panel, this is still a great panel to game on. Now for the menu system and controls here, it's classic Dell. The controls are a joystick on the right side, right rear, and then 4 buttons that you can program to do different things. And sometimes you're like forced to use them. However, I almost never use those 4 buttons. I think they're kind of pointless, but the joystick works well and it's a very intuitive system. There's not really any learning curve. As far as the menu system itself, it's again, classic Dell. It doesn't look pretty, but it's very, very functional, and all the settings are very easy and simple to get to, even for someone that doesn't understand maybe the lingo of how these monitors and response time settings and everything. It's very easy to find all of your different settings, unlike like BenQ is the one where it kind of uses those different names that are not always intuitive. So yeah, it gets a full pass, but at this point, the menu system does look fairly dated, but again, that's me being nitpicky. It's kind of one of my pet peeves. As far as Vesa compatibility, this is super easy to mount with a 100mm by 100mm Vesa mount. Continuing on with that, stand and build quality here is great. We expect that from Dell and Alienware. They've been doing a great job, and this is no exception. This has height, tilt, swivel, and full rotation, both to the left and the right, going completely vertical. So this is a great stand, it feels solid, and it works very, very well. Now, this way outdoes the Gigabyte M27Q. I personally would never buy a monitor just because of like the ergonomics over another monitor. I pretty much only take into account the panel itself as far as my buying decision, but if you do take that into account with your buying decision, the Dell is like far better than the Gigabyte that only has height and tilt. All right, but the most important section of the video, price and value, and should you buy this monitor? Well, firstly, you can only buy this from Dell's website, and the price tag of this is $299.99. That's a great price. For that price, I think it's very worth it. I think it's competitive in the industry, and it gives you a lot for your money. However, at the time of filming, this is currently on sale for $249.99. That is a ridiculously good price tag. If this monitor is on sale at all, even if it's just $10 or $20 off, this is a fantastic deal and I fully recommend it. The Gigabyte has not really gone on sale much that I can see. It's pretty much always at that $299.99 price tag. If this one is on sale when the Gigabyte isn't and you're choosing between the two, I recommend the Dell 100% of the time. $250 for this monitor is amazing. And this is going to be a monitor that you're going to be super, super happy with in the long term for a price tag that's very easy to swallow. But again, if you want to check it out, there are Dell.com links below. And if you want to check out my unboxing and first impressions of this video before doing all the tests and getting the review, well, you can check that out right there. Subscribe below for more content. I do monitor unboxings, monitor reviews, and also TV unboxings and reviews. We're going to be getting into that more, but this was Type C Tech Reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next video.